In 1945, American bombs reduced Toyota's most important factory to ash and rubble. Everything was gone. And yet, from that exact moment of total destruction, something began that would eventually humiliate the most powerful car industry on the planet. Not through aggression, not through cheaper prices, but through an idea so simple, so quietly radical, that the most powerful executives in Detroit laughed at it and then spent the next 50 years desperately trying to copy it. This is the story of how a bombed-out nation with nothing left rebuilt itself into the most reliable car-making force in human history. And the man at the center of this story wasn't even Japanese. He was an elderly American statistician that nobody in his own country wanted to hear. When World War II ended, Japan had almost nothing. Factories were destroyed, raw materials were scarce, and the cars that Japanese companies managed to scrape together in those first desperate years were rough, inconsistent, and unreliable. Kiichiro Toyoda, Toyota's leader, had actually started the company by purchasing a Chevrolet sedan, taking it completely apart on the workshop floor and having his engineers measure every single component. Those early Toyota vehicles were essentially hand-studied copies of American designs. Engines ran hot, cylinder blocks cracked under stress. Kiichiro himself admitted it openly. Design effort alone would never be enough. They needed a fundamentally different way of thinking about how to build anything at all. That different way of thinking arrived in the summer of 1950, carried by a 60-year-old American named W. Edwards Deming. Deming was a statistician who had spent nearly 2 decades trying to convince American factory managers to listen to him. His argument was simple but unsettling. When products came out defective, the fault almost never rested with the individual workers. The real problem was the system that management had designed around them. Fix the system, and quality will follow naturally. American executives in Detroit were not interested. After the war, U.S. factories could barely keep up with global demand. Nobody wanted to fix what appeared to be working fine. Japan had every reason to listen. When Japanese engineers invited Deming to lecture in Tokyo, he found an audience that was desperate, attentive, and hungry. That summer, Deming taught 450 Japanese engineers statistical quality control, the principle that data can identify and eliminate defects during manufacturing, not just catch them at the end. Quality was not something you inspected into a product after it was built. It was a management responsibility woven into every single stage of production. Japanese companies did not simply adopt his ideas. They internalized them, expanded on them, and built entire corporate philosophies around principles Deming had only sketched in outline. By 1960, the Prime Minister of Japan had awarded Deming the country's highest civilian honor. At Toyota's headquarters, a portrait of Deming hung in the main lobby, larger than the portrait of the company's own founder. America would not pay serious attention to this man for another 20 years. From Deming's foundation, Toyota built a production system unlike anything the world had seen. 3 principles formed its core. The first was judoka. Any worker on the assembly line, from the most senior engineer to someone on their very first day, had the authority to pull a cord and halt the entire production line the moment they spotted a defect. The line would not restart until the problem was permanently corrected. In Detroit, the assembly line never stopped. Defects were caught by inspectors at the end, sometimes, and sometimes they shipped straight to the dealer. Toyota inverted that entire logic. Fix it now. Make sure it never appears again.
The second principle was Kaizen, continuous improvement. Not a program with a launch date, but a permanent habit. Every worker was encouraged to suggest improvements, and management actually listened. Small adjustments compounded over months and years into measurable gains in speed and quality. The third was just-in-time manufacturing, producing and delivering components only when needed, in exact quantities, eliminating waste and forcing problems to surface immediately rather than hiding in a warehouse full of defective parts. Then came 1973, and everything changed overnight. The oil embargo quadrupled fuel prices in days. Gas stations ran dry. Lines of cars stretched for blocks across every major American city. The enormous V8-powered machines that had defined American driving for a generation suddenly looked like expensive liabilities. Consumers needed something smaller and more efficient, and Japanese automakers had been building exactly that for decades.
The Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla arrived on American roads as everything the domestic small cars were not: lightweight, efficient, and solidly built. When American manufacturers rushed their own compact models to showrooms in panic, the contrast only deepened the damage. The Ford Pinto and Chevrolet Vega became notorious for quality failures. Meanwhile, American families who tried the Japanese imports discovered something no brochure had even bothered to promise: the Toyota simply did not break down. Warranty visits, once a routine hassle with domestic cars, were virtually non-existent. That reputation spread neighbor to neighbor, parking lot to parking lot, and once it took hold, Detroit could not undo it. By 1980, Japanese brands commanded 21% of the American market. Japan had overtaken the United States in total automobile production for the first time in history. What followed was perhaps the most revealing experiment in modern manufacturing history. In 1984, General Motors and Toyota jointly reopened GM's shuttered Fremont, California factory, once the worst plant in the entire GM system, with absenteeism above 20% and cars rolling off the line that couldn't even start. Toyota rehired 85% of the same workers GM had laid off. Same building, same union, many of the same people. Under Toyota's management, absenteeism dropped to below 4%. Defects per 100 vehicles fell from 135 to 45. Assembly time per vehicle dropped from 31 hours to 19. GM had a front-row seat to the entire transformation, rotated hundreds of managers through the plant, and still could not replicate what it had witnessed at its other factories. The culture rejected it. The company that had been the world's largest automaker for 77 consecutive years filed for bankruptcy in 2009. Today, the numbers tell the same story they always have. Lexus leads all automotive brands in reliability, with just 135 problems per 100 vehicles. Toyota follows at 147. The industry average sits at 190. Honda owners spend roughly $428 annually on maintenance. Toyota owners spend $441. The industry average is $652. These are not lucky one-year results. Japanese manufacturers have held these positions consistently for decades. Why can't competitors close the gap permanently? Because the Anden cord is just a piece of rope. Kaizen is just a word in a dictionary. Any factory can install these tools in weeks. What cannot be installed on any timeline is the culture that gives those tools their meaning, the shared conviction from the assembly floor to the boardroom that quality is not a department you fund or a box you check. It is a way of approaching every single decision, every single day, without exception. W. Edwards Deming kept teaching and consulting right up until 10 days before his death in 1993 at the age of 93. He never stopped believing that any industry could match what Japan had accomplished, if the commitment went deep enough and lasted long enough. Every time someone turns the key on a 20-year-old Corolla sitting in a driveway somewhere, and the engine catches cleanly on the first try, they're hearing the echo of that commitment, carried forward through decades of discipline, refinement, and a quiet, unshakable belief that the right way to build something is the only way worth building it at all. If this story changed the way you see the cars around you, subscribe to GearTales, because the machines we drive carry stories far deeper than anyone ever tells you, and the next one is already waiting.